So I wonder where you are in this long haul journey. It always makes me think, when I use that word long haul, of those huge trucks that drive across continents and haul things over extraordinary roads and passes and dips in the road. I suppose some of us, when we started off with the pandemic journey, were hoping that it would be a sprint, that it wouldn't take too long and we'll be through on the other side, life will resume. But 4 and a bit months down the line, we seem to be only beginning to go towards the peak now. Sometimes when we're in spiritual direction and it's difficult to start unpacking some of the dynamics within our particular experience, the director might ask the directee, is there a particular story, verse or phrase in the Bible that seems to resonate best, not perfectly, but best, with what you're going through right now? And so I found myself asking that question. If I were to name how I'm feeling now, and to start looking at some of the graces that are intrinsic to what is held within this scripture verse or parable or story, what would it be saying to me? So the phrase that has come to mind is part of the opening verses in Hebrews chapter 12. And in particular the words that read, "Run with perseverance the race that is set before you." Now, I'm not a runner. Not even at school was I ever chosen to be in a running team. It always feels to me as if I've got this long and cumbersome body to haul with me, which isn't dreadfully streamlined or very light and fast. If I was involved in any kind of athletics, it was usually high jump or long jump. Something along those lines suited me far more. So why this image of a race? I think part of it is because, again, maybe I need the reminder that this isn't a sprint, it is a marathon, which means that we don't always see where the finish line is. And because we don't see that, there are certain things that are very important. We need to be able to be unencumbered. Are there things that are entangling us, tripping us up? When whoever the author was of Hebrews wrote that, it would have had as a picture in the author's mind the ancient games, I suppose a form of Olympic Games like we have today. And in those days, with the robes, the athletes would have either tied the robes around their waists, certainly out of the way of their legs and their arms. But many times when people were running, they actually chose to run completely naked. No shoes, there are none of the speciality garments that we have today, and no clothing on. A real sense of coming totally as they were born, naked. And maybe this is also part of the strength of what we are being invited into is not to pretend to try and be somebody else, to disguise who we are, to cover over and make us appear more than we are, but to come as we are. If you were to ask me, how is my running going? I would say not good. And I don't mean necessarily the physical running. I mean the mental, the emotional, psychological. And when I say not good, I think it's in response to the perception that running is the first prize. Running is the way it ought to be going on. But is that true? My sense is it doesn't matter if we hobble or we crawl. The point is to keep on keeping on. There's something about the stamina that is called forth at times like this that reveal very clearly what our purpose, our reason for being, the meaning of life is. What is it that gets me up in the morning? What is it that gets you up in the morning? Well, it certainly isn't to train to run. But again, what is it? What is that thing? Is a sense of duty, a sense of obligation, responsibility. Those are wonderful things that can be used by God to get us out of bed and get moving. But more than that, what is the thing that helps us to persevere? What matters so much to us? And it's interesting because in many ways we are being stripped of the things that would have helped us to avoid answering those questions with any level of depth. You know, the distractions, the entertainments of life are not there in the same way. And so it's not about the short-term pleasure. It is about the long-term values. I don't know if you can remember in the 1992 Olympics, and some of you probably know this story very, very well. I remember when I saw it, I just wept. I didn't see it at the time, but afterwards I watched it. There was a young man in the 400 meters sprint who had been through a lot of pain with a lot of injuries. His name was Derek Redmond, and despite everything that he had been through, he qualified for the Olympics. And not only did he qualify, but he had a very good chance of winning a gold medal. In the semi-finals of the 400 meter sprint, he got off to an amazing start. He was running like the wind, he got his rhythm so well, and as he was turning the corner, coming in to the kind of halfway stretch, as he was heading in lane number 5, if you'd been close enough, you would have heard something pop, and what had happened is his hamstring had snapped. Well, that was the end of the Olympics for him, and he lay writhing with pain. When the officials ran to go and help him, he waved them away. He got up and he started hobbling with his face contorted in agony. He started hobbling towards the finish line, the last 220 meters. He wanted to finish what he had started. It didn't matter that he couldn't finish in the way that he had trained for, that his fitness levels had been fine-honed to do. What mattered that he tried to finish. everybody was so gripped by this drama unfolding in front of them that the entire stadium stood up in silence. Even the officials and the police who were keeping watch that the spectators didn't do anything untoward were so focused on what he was doing that they didn't notice a man running down the stadium, climbing over the barrier, until he was already halfway across the track to Derek. This man was Jim, the father of Derek. He got to his son, put his son's arm around his shoulders and held his son as his son sobbed, his whole body shaking, lost dreams. And together they completed the race. I don't know who won the race that year, but I do know who won the marathon, the personal, not giving up, drawing on a strength beyond his own and leaning on the help that was provided with his father. More and more as I've reflected on this verse, I've become deeply aware that in this marathon, if I am going to depend on my resources, on what I can do, I'm not going to get to the finish line, because there's so much that will conspire towards me giving up, me turning around and choosing another racetrack which would be easier, distracting myself and not keeping my eyes focused on Jesus. And yet maybe it's this very seeming impossibility which is glorious. Because when I can't do something and I know that, and yet I keep doing it, it can only be God. Because I don't have the strength, because I do not have the wherewithal, it must have come from somewhere. And I like to believe, and I do believe, that it's come from a divine being. So it becomes this extraordinary reassurance of my own faith. It tells us also in that verse that the communion of the saints are part of encouraging us. And I believe that one of the ways that we can help ourselves during this time is to read biographies, autobiographies of people that inspire us. They don't have to have a faith. It's just about people who, against the odds, seem to have been able to draw on something bigger than themselves, and who've been able to keep their focus outside of their belly button, gazing into a greater need. There are many resources available to us, an infinitude of creative ways of being our own best I amness in this marathon, and allowing the impossible to become God's possible. So the next time you have a moment, what is the phrase, what is the quote? It doesn't even have to be out of the Bible, that is catching your attention and that seems to be naming your experience. Ask why, explore the meaning, and draw forth some of the juices that will continue to sustain you, to inspire, and really to provide what seems indefinable and yet so real. Thank you for being part of the cloud of witnesses, and for letting me share some of me with you this evening. Good night. Give yourselves a hug and know that you are so valuable.